our guest with us in studio is Israel Ledesma. Israel is Neighborhood Resident Development Manager with Habitat for Humanity of Kent County and wears a number of other hats in the community. He's here with us today to talk about challenges, mentoring, and making a difference. Israel, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Well, thank you, Alan. I'm very grateful and honored to be a part of the show.
Absolutely. When we talk about community leadership, that's a really important mantle to wear, and I know that you take that very seriously. But if you could look back to your early days, that probably wasn't on your horizon.
No, not at all. Actually, I had quite the opposite thoughts on my mind. When you're growing up young, and depending on how you grow up, you're really focused on yourself. And I didn't always grow up poor when I was younger. I had what most people really want, what I think everybody really wants, and that's a family. I grew up with a mom, my sister, my stepfather raised me up until I was about 8 or 9, and I didn't really understand what poverty was until after my parents separated. And before that, we would have our Easters were like Christmas. We would get these huge Easter baskets and basketballs, and we'd have birthday parties at McDonald's, and we'd have birthday parties at roller rinks, and we would celebrate different holidays like Halloween, where my parents would get dressed up themselves, and we'd go trick-or-treating, and that was the norm for me. And my mentor was my stepfather. It was my godfather who baptized me. That was the leadership that I looked up to for the first part of my life. And then when my parents separated, we moved into the Granville Avenue corridor where my mother's family lived. And my grandfather was an entrepreneur. He owned a little bit over 32 homes in the Granville Avenue corridor. He was one of the first Latino entrepreneurs. He had owned Arizona Groceries, and he owned a couple laundromats and pool halls in the community during that time. So he had money, but he had 12 kids, and they were all adults. But it just became my mom, my sister, and myself. And my mom struggled to try to maintain that lifestyle, and unfortunately she wasn't able to. So moving into the community is where I saw poverty for the first time. It's where we had to readjust our way of thinking and the activities that we were involved in or were able to do. And so the leadership that I grew up once knowing between my stepfather and godfather had shifted now to my uncles and to my cousins, my older cousins that were there. And there was a definitely different dynamic between that.
And you got into some trouble.
Yes. So, I wasn't a perfect child by any means. I always make fun of a couple of leaders that I have the privilege of working with now that they were involved with mentorship programs. They were involved with the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan, and they were always about building leadership within the youth. And I was that kid that would watch them do the community service work because they were cleaning up my mess, the mess that my friends, my other family members would kind of do. So the spray painting on the walls and things like that. So definitely got into trouble when I was younger. Absolutely.
Okay, some acting out.
Yes, well, I don't know if it was acting out. I think it was just the way the environment was. It was something that was normal in the neighborhood. It was something that I didn't think twice about not doing.
Because everyone else was doing it.
Because it was the norm. Yeah, absolutely. It was the norm. So I think...
Did you have run-ins with the police?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I definitely think there could have been more run-ins with them had I gotten caught, but I'm thankful to God that I didn't get caught as many times as I should have. But yes, I definitely contributed to some of the chaos that happened in the community. And my leadership style has evolved over time. It has shifted in some ways that are contrary to what some leaders who consider leadership now would look at that as. Um, when you grow up in a community that isn't in alignment with the social norms, I think many of us who grow up in in those types of disenfranchised neighborhoods or those types of communities where you have you grow up in a single parent home, mom's always trying to work or trying to do the best that she can to kind of keep food on the table, roof over your head. Um, they tend to not be around as much, and so
They can't. They're working. They're doing too many other things.
they are definitely doing too many other things. And
So what created the shift for you? When did things start
oh gosh,
to turn around?
that's a I've thought about that a lot when that shift started to happen for me. The shift to want more happened early in life because I remember having a lot as a child. We'd go to car shows. My stepfather had lowriders, and we'd do a lot of things, go to museums. And when we moved, the environment and the culture was so much different than I was used to. And Christmases changed. So now there was less items under the tree. Now there was the phrase that I wasn't used to, if God is willing, you will get what you ask for.
Okay.
So it's always if God is willing. It got to a point where I'm like, God obviously isn't willing, right? So
I'm on the bad list. I'm on the
right,
naughty
right.
list.
I'm on the naughty list, and what did I do wrong? Of course, I'm sure he could figure out some of those things.
You were caught doing a few of those.
Right, that's called doing a few. But
So did you turn yourself around, or was there an important person who took an interest in you?
Well, I dropped out of school. In the 7th grade, I was kicked out of school about 15 times.
Oh my.
Usually for fighting. 8th grade, I was kicked out 8 times. I was always a good student, so I never really had to go to school, study. I could just go to school and pass. I made it to the 9th grade. Don't ask me how, but I made it to the 9th grade. I went to Central High School, and then I was there for 2 weeks. And the same situation arose, and I got kicked out of Central, was asked never to come back, and I ended up going to an alternative school. And it was the alternative school that really allowed me the opportunity to just kind of work at my own pace, kind of be left alone. I didn't have the pressure of having to wake up and go to school every day if I didn't want to. So that allowed me some peace of mind, and it allowed me the opportunity to do what I wanted.
Maybe a sense that you had a little bit more control in an otherwise chaotic and turbulent.
Yeah, I definitely would
environment.
agree with that, absolutely. And there was a math teacher, African-American teacher there. Her name was Miss Rufus, and Miss Rufus was my math teacher. And Miss Rufus didn't play. She did not play. If she loved you, she loved you. She would come, when I would miss school, she would come and knock on my door. And I would look out the window like if it was a Jehovah's Witness and just kind of sitting there, not wanting to answer the door. I mean, no disrespect. That's just kind of something that, we kind of joke around and say when insurance people used to come around the neighborhood and want to sign you up. But she would come and knock on the door and bring me to school every day when I was ready to skip. She would not let me fail. She planted the seed in my life to know that there was more value about me that I didn't understand about myself. And I continued to make the same mistakes. I ended up dropping out of the alternative school. A couple years later, I went back, got my GED, and then, I realized I had to work. I had to work because I was a father at a very young age. I was a father at age 15.
Okay.
And wow, how do I become a father? How do I act appropriately? So I didn't do well. Honestly, I didn't do well at all at 15 years old. You're still self-absorbed. You're not thinking about anything else. And I didn't really have a very strong relationship with my eldest daughter growing up. But I knew I had to work because the friends of the court at the time didn't really care how old you were. They just knew you had an obligation.
Absolutely.
And so I had to work. different jobs. So I can build you a home. I can wire your house. I can, shingle your
developed some
roof.
skills.
I developed a lot of skills and it was those skills that made me realize this is not the work for me. Because I would remember seeing different workers having the ability to slack off. And those were usually the managers, the project managers, or somebody higher up. I was the laborer.
You were the hourly guy.
I was the hourly guy. If I had to go dig a trench that was 4 feet deep, that was my job. If I had to crawl in the basement or in an attic, that was my job. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I should be the guy right there, managing. I can do that. And I always knew I had the ability to do that. But knowing that you have the ability to do that while still having the fear of stepping out of what you're accustomed to, there's a huge difference. And I think a lot of kids get stuck right there,
Did you think you weren't good enough for college?
I didn't think I was good enough for anything other than what I had developed in my neighborhood.
Okay.
Because that was who I was. My neighborhood defined who I was. When you sit and you look back at life and you look back at all your experiences and you reflect on that, you begin to conceptualize on what you're reflecting on. Well, for me, everything that I reflected on as a child always revolved around my immediate need. Mm-hmm. How do I satisfy that immediate need now? So knowing that I wanted more, because I was used to having more younger, but knowing that my mother couldn't provide and she was working herself to death, 3 jobs, and my sister really took care of me. So knowing that she was out there doing the best she can and it still wasn't enough prompted me to start to take action of my own.
Taking things more seriously.
Taking things more seriously, trying to earn $1 any way I could,
Okay.
Was really the goal, to be able to help my mom. And so I was placed in a position where I was able to help her, able to give her some money when she needed it, able to pay an electric bill, able to do those types of things at a very young age, at 15 years old. I was able to do that. At 15 is when I had my first kid. At 15 was when I actually did finally get in trouble with the law, where I actually had to pay the price for my actions. It was then and there I realized that I needed to change my life, to move it in a different direction, to really try to make sure that my environment didn't control me, that I controlled my environment. A lot easier said than done, Alan.
Sure.
Definitely a lot easier said than done. So it took some time. It was a process of evolution, a process of observation. Growing up, we didn't have role models that resembled someone that looked like me or anything. So I remember there was this one gentleman, and I never met him, but we had a pharmacy in our neighborhood about 20 plus years ago. It was Kaufman's Pharmacy. And there was a gentleman that would pull up every day in a silver Jaguar. And he would step out of that car, and he had the nice long trench coat, and he was suited up, really sharp, white-haired. And I remember sitting on our porch because we lived right across the street from there, and I thought, that's what I want out of life. That's who I want to be. And I had no idea about who he was, what his character, his integrity, anything about him. I had no idea. But I knew I liked the way he looked.
The trappings.
Exactly. I knew it. Okay. And so I said to myself, that's success. So that was what success was for me, was this guy that I had no clue about. And it was more of the material things that he had, because I didn't have those things. Mm-hmm. And so I think oftentimes kids in the neighborhood, when they grow up seeing that, it's all materialistic.
So we have to fast forward, because since then you've gone on to earn a couple of degrees.
Yes.
With the goal of one more. But what propels you now to be a leader and a mentor to young people in the community?
So, I struggle with the word leader for me, because I look at, there are leaders that want the title, and then there are leaders that want to lead people. And I consider myself a servant leader. Growing up, life was all about me. And when I got into trouble at a very young age, things started to happen. My thought process started to change. And I realized that life isn't just about me. Life is about everyone else. And I understood that all my troubles could serve a purpose for someone. The story, everybody has a story to tell. And I felt like my story could help people. There are oftentimes leaders will help those people that are already emerging leaders. They already have things going for them. But what about the people that were like me?
It's easy to show up for the kids who are just on the
Right.
cresting.
What about those that are down here? Because those that are down here, that was me.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that I enjoy working with. So I wanted to be able to lift them up, give them an opportunity to look past the wall that they've faced their whole life. And that wall is what keeps them sitting idle.
Sure. So we have to wrap up in just a moment, but for our viewers who are watching right now and are moved by your personal story, what would you advise them in their work, in their communities?
I would advise them to really step outside of themselves and really try to understand where those people are in their lives, because everybody's at a different place. And again, we need leaders at every level. But we need more leaders down here to help transform the minds of our youth, to help transform the minds of the adults who've been stuck for so long.
Servant leaders.
We need more servant leaders, absolutely.
Awesome. We're going to have to leave it go for there.
All right.
It's been wonderful talking with you, and I want to thank you for coming by and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me, Alan. It's been a pleasure.
You bet. And thank you for joining us. If you're watching on TV, stay tuned for our following segments on information and humor. If you're watching us on the internet, I hope you will check out our other conversations with the extraordinary community members who are working to make these United States a more inclusive place.
Somebody who is on our soil seeking protection while they're here.
That then has a secondary feature. The vocal